What's up, everyone? Jason Gilbo here with Chris Etherington, taking a look at some Valspar champion picks for this week over on DraftKings. Coming off a week where, you played Henrik Stenson, you probably weren't doing that well, like myself. I know you had some fadeable Stenson lineups. How'd those turn out for you?
Yeah, same here. Stenson was a good pick last week if you did your homework. His stats just lined up for that course. And then for some reason, he decided to withdraw in the middle of his round. And he's saying it is because of a stomach virus. So hopefully he's a little bit better for this week because I'm going to go back to him because I just know that people are just not going to play him at all this week. I think he's going to be probably pretty close to 10% owned for this week.
Yeah, let's talk about those top guys. There's only 4 guys in the double-digit salary range: Justin Thomas, Daniel Berger, Matt Kuchar, and Henrik Stenson. And Stenson's my favorite out of the group, actually. I think Berger, we were talking before, Berger's probably going to be the highest owned out of those group. But, a couple of guys, Thomas isn't really a consistent guy. I worry about Kuchar a little bit too.
Yeah, when you break it down for these 4 players, you got JT at the top. He has that name value, but his swing right now is just a little off. I'm just not going to play him. And I think he's going to be probably around 20%, maybe 15% owned. And if you go down to Berger, who I think is going to be the most popular play of the week, people will start with Berger, I think, just because he's playing pretty well so far this year. He finished 16th last week. He has 2 missed cuts in his last 5 events. So with his recent form, I think people are just going to almost auto-click him and just forget the other guys at the top.
And I think that's why I kind of feel a little bit uneasy about Berger, because those 2 missed cuts right in there. Like, usually when you're paying up over 10K, you want to feel a little bit safer about these guys. I think that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Stenson a little bit in this top, range, because one, his miscut wasn't really a miscut, but Stenson, the withdrawal was just more of a stomach issue than anything.
Yeah, and also Stenson has done this before where he will withdraw during a WGC event, and then he'll go to a next week's event and he'll actually win. That's happened last year, I believe, when he went to the European side and he won that tournament the week after withdrawing due to his knee. So with his stomach thing, I'm not going to take anything from it. I'm just going to click him and maybe play Matt Kuchar as well. But other than those 2, that's it for me.
And as far as the 9K guys, in your article, you got 3 9K guys that you're looking at. We'll start with Patrick Reed. Pretty consistent this year and in a really good spot.
Yeah, when you look at his course history, his last 2 years, he finished 7th last year and he finished 2nd the year before that. He's priced where I think he might be overlooked. With Berger being right there and with Charles Howell and Bill Haas below him, I think people will overlook him. He hasn't missed a cut at all this year. Couple of high finishes, but other than that, it's been mediocre for the most part. And with his iron play, he's been about average, hitting 62% for his greens.
Yeah, I think Reed's probably the guy, the first guy I looked at when I was coming down the pricing list that I felt really good about. And there's a couple of consistent guys in this range. Howell, who's been a consistent guy that we've plugged and played for most of these weeks so far to start the season, but now he's finally priced up about 2,000 from where basically we've seen him in that 7K range for most of the season.
Yeah, I think because of that, people might be a little scared on playing Charles because he's mainly just a big cut type of guy. He doesn't really contend all that often, but when you look at his recent history of for this year, besides from the Honda, it was his last 6 tournaments where he finished inside the top 15. So I think he's priced right this week, and I'm not too sure about his ownership. It might be around 15%, but that's okay. I'm going to have a fair share of him in my lineups.
Another guy that you were looking at, Ryan Moore, 9K. You described him as the perfect GPP play this week.
Yeah, with only 1 top 10 and a missed cut so far for this season, he, to me, makes just a perfect GPP play. Mainly because his last 2 attempts here, he finished 3rd and 5th. So being priced where he is, I kind of like him this week, and he's been, again, very consistent, just like Patrick Reed, hitting just over that 60% mark for greens.
There's a couple of guys right in that range that we were talking about before the show as well. I mean, Gary Woodland, I have some interest in at 8,900 this week. I mean, he's played pretty well of late. I mean, his only missed cut was at the Phoenix Open. And a decent price tag. I mean, he showed actually some pretty good upside. I mean, he's 2 top 5 finishes in his last 3 there.
Yeah, when you look at his course history, he's won here back in 2011. He only has 2 missed cuts, so I'm not too worried about that. When you look at his recent form, he only has, like you said, the 1 missed cut at Phoenix, and he actually played very well at the Honda. And then he finished basically in the middle of the pack last week in Mexico. With all that said, I think Woodland would be a fine play for either cash or for GPP.
In last year's winner, Charles Schwartzel, rated a similar price. You think people are going to be some recency bias just given the fact that he finished here first last year?
Yeah, I think people will look at that and they're just going to play him, not realizing his recent form. He has 2 missed cuts in his last 3. Something's a little off with him, I think. So I think I'm just going to stay away and until I see something different. Other than that, yeah, I kind of have to stay away with that price for Charles. It's a little too risky for me.
Yeah, 38 last week. I mean, 2 missed cuts the week before that, the 2 weeks before that. So recent form isn't that great. And, discussing the 8K range, Kevin Na is probably my favorite out of this group, actually.
Yeah, Kevin Na, when you look at his recent form, his last missed cut was actually back at the Shriners. So that's probably going a little too far back. If you look at just this year, he has a top 10 finish at the Genesis, which is kind of a little similar course style for this week. So for being price at 87, I think that's a fine price for Kevin Na. He's hitting 65% of his greens.
How do you feel about his price tag? I mean, 8,700. Usually we see him a little bit lower. Is he kind of priced up into a more appropriate range?
He might be a little expensive for most guys to play, but I think with his recent play, with his recent greens to regulation percentage, I wouldn't mind playing him like 10 or 50% exposure in my lineups for this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not going to go probably all aboard as much as I like him, but certainly is a solid player. Any of these guys interest you kind of moving down as we creep into the sub 8K range?
Yeah, the only guy I'm really looking into is maybe Webb Simpson and maybe Sean O'Hare. Simpson's been hitting his screens at 65%. Same with Sean, just a little under 65. Sean's recent form is actually really good. Only one missed cut in his last 6. So I wouldn't mind playing him. And for Simpson, again, I think he's finally figured out with this putter. He's finished second at Phoenix, and he only has one missed cut in his last 6 as well. So those two guys I'm looking at in the 8,000 range, and I think that's it for me.
I'm kind of thinking Simpson might fly under the radar. I mean, I could be wrong, but I kind of have that vibe this week.
Yeah, he's probably priced up there where you have Graham Dillette, who's playing well. You got Bubba Watson, where people are going to play him. You got Graham McDowell as well in there, who's actually playing well recently. So I think the low $8,000 guys are going to take the bulk of the ownership, and I think Simpson and Na will be overlooked for this week.
And below 8K, I know you like Luke Donald. What are your thoughts on Jason Duffner, 7,900, playing really well and a pretty good course history here?
For me, recently he's not hitting his irons too well. He's missing a lot of greens, but I mean, if you look at his course history, he hasn't missed a cut. It's basically an average finish around T20, something like that. And then when you go to his series of form, it's pretty much the same idea. He's finishing around T20, T25. It's just a whole hum kind of start for the season for him. So I think I'm going to fade for this week and see what happens with him. And from there, that's pretty much it for me.
You don't like him at cash at all? I mean, I feel like he's kind of that cash game guy where he's not going to get you a ton of upside, but I feel like he's a little bit safe as well.
Yeah, if you're one of those Duffner fans, I wouldn't mind him as a cash play given his course history that he hasn't missed a cut. And he does have somewhat of an upside to finish high, but again, I think I'm just going to wait, me personally, to wait another week and see how he's playing, and maybe hopefully he'll get priced a little bit cheaper where I'll play him some more.
And Luke Donald, 7,800 is a guy that you were looking at. You wrote him up in your article, and you got quite a bit on him just because, one, he has a really good course history here, and then it kind of dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, for his course history, he hasn't missed a cut. He's won here in 2012, and outside of his win, he has 3 top 10s as well. People forget that he was world number 1 for a while, and then he decided to change his swing, try to get a little bit more distance, which failed. And so he was a little off the last 2 or 3 years, but recently he's actually been showing some form. Like, you'll see him on top of leaderboards every now and then, which is nice to see. If you look back at the Genesis Open, he finished inside the top 20. So with that tough of course, I wouldn't mind playing him in bulk of my lineups for this week.
I'm looking at him as well. I think, out of a safety standpoint, I think he's going to be okay, especially because I don't like a lot of these guys around him. I mean, Russell Knox got off to a hot start this season, but he's really drifted off since February started.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Russell Knox, he's barely hitting half of his screens. I mean, he has an okay history. He's made the cut last 3 years. And then if you look at his game log for this year, he was basically near dead last net last week, and then he missed 2 cuts before that. So the only good finish was the Sony Open, where he finished 11th. But for some reason after that, he's just been a little off with his iron play. So I'm just going to have to fade him this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want any part of him until we see any sort of form as well. I mean, moving down the list, do you like any of these guys as we start to creep into, 7-4, 7-3? Martin Laird is a kind of recognizable name as well. Harris English too.
Yeah, for me, I think I'll go to maybe a guy that's a little older, who's not playing as much, but is Steve Stricker. He's been hitting his greens fairly well so far. He hasn't played that much so far this year. He's only played at Pebble Beach and Phoenix this year, but he's made the cut both times. He's basically playing part-time on the tour right now, but he's your accuracy guy. So if that's the type of golfer that you want to have for this week.
Yeah, and another name I feel a little bit comfortable using is Byung-Hoon An, who's 7,400. Been a consistent guy this year. I mean, nothing spectacular as far as what he's put up. I mean, outside of the Phoenix Open where he finished 6th, but he's been just kind of a consistent guy.
Yeah, with his distance and with his iron play, I wouldn't mind going to him as well. He hasn't missed a cut this season. And like you said, with the sixth place finish at the Phoenix, where he was kind of overlooked that week. This week where he's priced, I think he's going to be overlooked again. I think people are going to play more of Charlie Hoffman, Kevin Streelman, people like that, basically. And I think On is just going to go under the radar this week. I think he's going to be probably around 10%, maybe 12% this week.
That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, I feel like he's a cheaper play, and there is a little bit of upside with him. And you mentioned a couple of those other names. I mean, JJ Spawn's a guy that we've talked about. I mean, he's been pretty solid. Obviously, no course history there for the rookie. You like him, or do you feel he's just getting up a little bit more pricey?
I do like him for this week. He's priced fairly well, just kind of like Charles Howell. For Spawn, he only has 1 missed cut in his last 5 tournaments, and then including those 5, he has 2 top 10s, 1 at the Phoenix and 1 at the Farmers. He's really good with his irons. He's hitting it almost 72% of the time, and has the distance as well. So I think he's going to be that guy that will make the cut and then maybe finish probably around top 20, top 15 type of deal for the week.
As far as, minus 7K guys go, as far as names, I mean, Scott Piercy's here, Robert Garrigus. I think my favorite's Adam Hadwin at 6,800.
Yeah, for some reason, Hadwin just doesn't get priced up like some of the other guys. Remember, he's the guy that shot the 59 earlier this year. He's been hitting his greens just above average on tour at 66%, and then just like On, he has a distance to score. So for some reason, he's still priced to where he's basically a scrub, according to most pros. But with his recent form, I'm just going to have to play him and probably, I would say, around 20% of my lineups for this week.
I'm going to be locking away with him. I mean, I think he's just going to be one of those staples to my lineups. One, because, solid player, and he does open up a lot of salary for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think with this pricing this week, it kind of forces you to go balanced, because when you break down the top guys above 10,000, you just kind of want to pick one or two and then go from there. But with Hadwin being at 68, it just leaves you a lot of room to play in the upper 8,000, 9,000 range.
Yeah, I think balance is the way to go. And we talked about, a lot of those 8K guys, Kevin Na, Gary Woodland, even getting into the lower 9Ks with Haas and Ryan Moore. I mean, it does seem to go balanced, because we didn't really touch on a lot of those, double digit guys, because one, we're not locking them in like we were in the past weeks.
Right. When you break it down, you just, like I said, you just have to pick your two favorites and pick who you think is going to win that week or for this week, and you just have to fade the other guys. For me personally, I think my two for this week will be Stetson and Kuchar, because I think those two will be lesser owned of the other two, with Thomas and Berger.
Yeah, Thomas Berger probably going to be the guys that draw the more ownership. And as far as a winner for this week, I mean, who are you looking at?
I think for the winner, I can really see Patrick Reed taking it down. He's been sort of like a ho-hum type of performance so far this season. He has a couple good high finishes, but he's been plugging his way. And I think this week, with his course history the last 2 years, I think he's going to win.
And I mean, that's kind of qualifies for a dark horse as well, because I don't think people are going to pick him to win this week.
Yeah, he could be an excellent dark horse. My dark horse for this week would be Ryan Moore, with his recent form and his course history as well. Same reason as Patrick Reed.
I'd probably look at Gary Woodland. I think that's my dark horse pick for this week. Just right around that range.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to use Woodland as their one and done pick for this week, just because of his course history and his recent play. I think he's going to be a popular play for the week.
Yeah, playing really well. If you want to check out Chris's article, you can head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. It is up on the site, and be sure to check out the rest of our great tools and content.